Amidst unbearable pain, a man finds himself trapped between grief and hopelessness. An innocent baby, a broken father, and a loyal dog become the protagonists of an unforgettable story. In the darkest moment, a heroic act changes everything in a surprising way. When fate seemed sealed, a true miracle happens. Before listening to this moving story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories of resilience and loyalty. The baby's cry echoed through the corridors of St. Clair Hospital, while Jack remained motionless, sitting on the cold bench in the waiting room. His eyes, fixed on a random spot on the white ceramic floor, seemed not to register the frantic movement of doctors and nurses rushing past. The world had collapsed upon his shoulders that October morning, when what should have been the happiest day of his life turned into his worst nightmare. Sarah, his wife, had passed away during childbirth, leaving him with a son he could barely look at. How could he hold that child, knowing that his arrival into the world coincided with the departure of his great love? The last 9 months had been pure happiness and preparation. The baby's room, painted in soft shades of green and yellow, had been ready for weeks. Sarah had personally chosen every detail, from the little teddy bears decorating the walls to the musical mobile hanging over the crib. Martha, Sarah's mother, arrived at the hospital as soon as she received the news. Her face, marked by suffering, contrasted with the strength she showed while holding her grandson in her arms. "Jack," she called softly, "you need to meet your son." But Jack just shook his head negatively, unable to utter any words. At home, Max, the German shepherd that had been part of the family for 5 years, anxiously awaited the return of his owners. The animal, which had always shown extraordinary sensitivity, seemed to sense that something was wrong. Since Jack and Sarah left in a hurry at dawn, he had remained vigilant near the door, his ears attentive to any movement. In the weeks that followed, the house that once overflowed with joy transformed into a heavy, silent environment. Jack wandered through the rooms like a ghost, especially avoiding the baby's room. Martha took care of little Noah, as Sarah had chosen to call him, settling in the guest room with her grandson. Max, in turn, developed an instant connection with the baby. The dog spent hours lying near the crib, his eyes attentive to every movement of the little one. When Noah cried, he was always the first to alert Martha, barking softly until she came to check what was happening. The nights were particularly difficult for Jack. Lying in the bed he once shared with Sarah, he relived every moment of their last years together. He remembered the day he met her in architecture school, their first kiss exchanged under the rain in the campus garden, the marriage proposal during a trip to Aspen. Each memory was like a knife piercing his chest. Work at the architecture firm, which was once his passion, became an impossible burden to carry. Projects accumulated on his desk, and clients began to complain about delays. His partners, understanding at first, began to show concern about his mental and professional state. One afternoon, while watching Martha rock Noah in the garden through the window, Jack found a positive pregnancy test stored in the drawer of the nightstand. It was the test that Sarah had taken, the one that changed their lives forever. Along with it, there was a small note written in her delicate handwriting. "My love will be 3. I can't wait to build our family together. I love you infinitely." The words triggered an explosion of emotions in Jack. The pain, which until then had been contained in a deep place of his being, violently overflowed. In a fit of anger and despair, he swept all the objects off the dresser, breaking picture frames and decorative items. The noise attracted Max, who entered the room barking, as if trying to get his attention. The dog approached cautiously, touching his nose to Jack's trembling hand. That simple gesture, loaded with affection and understanding, made him collapse in tears for the first time since the incident. Sitting on the floor, hugging the dog that meant so much to Sarah, Jack finally allowed himself to feel the full extent of his loss. Martha, who had come upstairs after hearing the noise, stopped at the bedroom door with Noah in her arms. The baby, as if feeling his father's pain, began to cry. Jack raised his eyes, meeting his son's gaze for the first time, the same eyes as Sarah's. So at that moment, something inside him broke even more, and he realized that he couldn't be the father that child deserved. Night fell over the house, bringing with it a decision that would forever change the fate of that family. Jack, consumed by pain and unable to accept his new reality, began to plan what he considered a definitive way out. What he didn't know was that Max, his faithful four-legged companion, would be fundamental in preventing an even greater tragedy from befalling that family already so hurt by fate. The clock on the living room wall marked 3 in the morning when Jack finally got up from the couch. For weeks he had been unable to sleep in his bed. The emptiness beside him was a constant reminder of Sarah's absence. With heavy steps, he headed to the kitchen, his red and swollen eyes revealing another sleepless night. As the water for coffee boiled, Jack allowed himself to look out the window. The garden, once so well tended by Sarah, now showed clear signs of neglect. The roses she loved so much were slowly withering, a cruel metaphor for what his life had become. It was in this moment of contemplation that he heard a soft cry coming from upstairs. Noah had just completed 1 month of life, a month that for Jack seemed like an eternity. Each day was a battle against his own feelings, a constant struggle between the love he knew he should feel for his son and the crushing pain that the mere sight of the baby caused him. Martha, always attentive, was already on her way to her grandson's room. Jack heard her whisper words of comfort while rocking the little one. His mother-in-law's voice, normally firm and decisive, sounded tired and sad. He knew that she was suffering too, not only from the loss of her daughter, but from seeing her son-in-law sinking deeper into his own despair. Max, as always, was alert. The dog climbed the stairs, his steps silent on the wood, to join Martha and Noah. Jack could hear the light thumping of the animal's tail against the floor, a comforting sound amid the oppressive silence of the early morning. Unable to return to the couch, Jack found himself walking toward his office. This room, which was once his creative refuge, now seemed to suffocate him with memories. On the wall, a large corkboard displayed photos of architectural projects, many of them done in partnership with Sarah. His eyes fell on one photo in particular, the two of them, smiling, in front of the first house they designed together. The Wallace. Memory hit him like a punch to the stomach. He remembered the day they received the news that they had won the Young Architects competition. Sarah had jumped into his arms, her eyes shining with happiness and pride. "We did it, love," she had said. "This is just the beginning of our story." But their story had been brutally interrupted. Jack felt the anger growing inside him, a blind fury against the fate that had taken everything from him. In an impulse, he tore the photo from the wall, crumpling it between his fingers. Soon, other photos followed the same path, falling to the floor like autumn leaves. The noise caught Martha's attention, who appeared at the office door with Noah in her arms. "Jack, please," she begged, her voice breaking. "Don't do this. Sarah wouldn't want to see you like this." Jack turned around, his eyes meeting his son's for the first time in days. The baby looked at him with curiosity, his tiny fingers clutching his grandmother's blouse. For a brief moment, Jack saw Sarah reflected in those innocent little eyes, and the pain was almost unbearable. "I can't, Martha," he murmured, his voice hoarse from crying so much. "I can't look at him without thinking of her, without remembering that he's here and she's not." Martha took a step forward, extending the baby toward his father. "Jack, this boy needs you. He's already lost his mother. He can't lose his father too." But Jack backed away, as if the simple act of touching his son could burn him. "I'm sorry," he said, quickly passing by Martha and leaving the office. In the days that followed, the situation only worsened. Jack started drinking, seeking in alcohol an escape from his pain. He spent hours locked in his room, coming out only to get another bottle, or when Noah's crying became unbearable. Martha, concerned about the welfare of her grandson and son-in-law, tried everything. She called friends, family members, even suggested that Jack seek professional help. But nothing seemed to reach him in his well of despair. One night, after a particularly heated argument with his mother-in-law, Jack left the house, stumbling down the dark street. He wandered aimlessly for hours, his mind clouded by alcohol and pain. When he finally returned, it was almost dawn. Upon entering the house, he was greeted by Max, who barked softly, as if reprimanding him for his absence. Jack knelt down, hugging the dog tightly. "What do I do, buddy?" he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "How do I move forward without her?" It was at this moment, with the sunrise beginning to illuminate the living room, that Jack made a decision. He couldn't continue like this. He couldn't be the father Noah deserved. In his disturbed mind, there was only one solution. With determined steps, he climbed the stairs toward the baby's room. Martha was sleeping deeply in the next room, exhausted after another night of caring for her grandson. Jack entered silently, approaching the crib where Noah slept peacefully. For a long moment, he just observed his son, so small and defenseless. Then, with trembling hands, he picked up the baby. "Forgive me," he murmured, "but I can't do this." Max, who had followed Jack to the room, began to bark, as if sensing that something was wrong. But Jack ignored him, leaving the room with Noah in his arms. He went down the stairs, passed through the front door, and walked toward the street, his mind focused on a single objective. What Jack didn't know was that his desperate decision would trigger a series of events that would forever change the destiny of all involved. And Max, the faithful companion who had always been by the family's side, would be a fundamental piece in preventing an even greater tragedy from befalling them. The sun had barely begun to rise on the horizon when Jack, with Noah in his arms, arrived at the train station. The place was practically deserted at that hour of the morning, with only a few employees preparing for another day of work. The smell of oil and metal hung in the air, mixing with the fresh scent of the morning dew. Jack walked as if in a trance, his steps echoing through the empty corridors of the station. Noah, now awake, looked around with curiosity, oblivious to the turmoil of emotions consuming his father. The baby let out a small moan, as if sensing the tension in the air. "Shh, it's okay," Jack whispered, more to himself than to his son. His hands trembled as he held Noah, the reality of what he was about to do beginning to weigh on his conscience. Meanwhile, at home, Martha woke up startled. A sixth sense, perhaps a grandmother's instinct, alerted her that something was wrong. She ran to Noah's room only to find the crib empty. Panic took hold of her when she realized that Jack was nowhere to be found either. "Jack! Noah!" she shouted, running from one room to another. It was then that she noticed Max at the front door, barking desperately. The dog seemed to want to tell her something, running back and forth, looking at the street, and then back at her. Without thinking twice, Martha grabbed her cell phone and car keys. "Come on, Max," she called, her voice trembling with fear. "We need to find them." Back at the station, Jack finally reached the platform. The first train of the morning would still be a few minutes away. He looked at the tracks below, the cold metal gleaming under the weak dawn light. His heart beat erratically in his chest, a mixture of fear and a strange sensation of relief. "Forgive me, Sarah," he murmured, tears streaming down his face. "I'm not strong enough to do this alone." Noah began to cry, as if sensing the imminent danger. Jack held him closer, fighting against the impulse to back away. In his tormented mind, he believed he was doing the right thing, freeing his son and himself from a life of pain and regret. Meanwhile, Max was guiding Martha through the city streets. The dog seemed to have a sixth sense, barking and pointing the way with his nose. Martha drove as fast as she could, silently praying that it wouldn't be too late. At the station, the distant sound of the approaching train echoed through the empty platform. Jack took a step forward, dangerously approaching the edge. Noah cried louder and louder, his little fists waving in the air. It was at this critical moment that Max and Martha arrived at the station. The dog, without waiting for the car to come to a complete stop, jumped through the open window and ran toward the platform, barking furiously. Jack, surprised by the sudden sound, turned around. His eyes widened upon seeing Max running toward him, followed closely by Martha. For a brief instant he hesitated, his foot suspended over the void between the platform and the tracks. "Jack, no!" shouted Martha, her voice laden with desperation and plea. "Please think about what you're doing." Max reached Jack first, jumping and grabbing the hem of his pants with his teeth. The dog pulled with all his strength, as if perfectly understanding the gravity of the situation. The sound of the train grew louder, its approach imminent. Jack looked at Noah, at Max, and then at Martha, who was now just a few meters away, extending her arms toward him. "Son, please," begged Martha, tears streaming down her wrinkled face. "Sarah wouldn't want this. She loved you both more than anything. Don't throw away the gift she left for you." Martha's words seemed to pierce the fog of despair that surrounded Jack. He looked at Noah, really seeing him for the first time in weeks. The baby had stopped crying and was staring at him with big, curious eyes, so similar to Sarah's. At that moment, something inside Jack broke, not from pain or despair, but as if a dam of pent-up emotions finally gave way. He staggered backward, moving away from the edge of the platform, exactly when the train went zooming by, raising a gust of wind. Martha ran to them, wrapping Jack and Noah in a tight hug. Max barked and jumped around, as if celebrating the outcome of the situation. "It's okay," Martha whispered, stroking Jack's hair as he sobbed, still holding Noah firmly. "You're safe now. Let's go home." As the small group left the station, the sun finally rose completely on the horizon, bathing the city in its golden light. It was as if nature was signaling a new beginning, a chance to start over. However, the road ahead would still be long and difficult. Jack knew he would need help to overcome his pain and learn to be the father Noah deserved. But at that moment, hugged by his mother-in-law and his son, with Max faithfully by his side, he felt for the first time in weeks a small spark of hope. The group got into Martha's car, physically and emotionally exhausted. As they drove back home, Jack looked at Noah, now peacefully asleep in his arms, and made a silent promise to Sarah and himself. He would do his best to be the father his son deserved, honoring the memory and love of his wife. What none of them knew was that this dramatic morning would be just the beginning of a journey of healing and self-discovery, full of challenges, but also moments of deep connection and unconditional love. The weeks following the incident at the train station were a whirlwind of emotions for Jack. The reality of what he had almost done hit him with full force, bringing with it a wave of guilt and shame that threatened to completely engulf him. However, something had changed within him. Noah's gaze at that critical moment had awakened a spark of connection that Jack could no longer ignore. Martha, demonstrating a strength that Jack didn't know she possessed, took control of the situation. With firmness and compassion, she insisted that her son-in-law seek professional help. "Jack," she said one day, holding his trembling hands, "you're not alone in this fight. Sarah wouldn't want to see you giving up like this. Please do this for Noah, for her and for yourself." Reluctant at first, Jack finally agreed to start therapy. The initial sessions were painful, immersing him in memories and emotions that he had desperately tried to suppress. But gradually, like a ship emerging from a storm, he began to glimpse a path through his pain. At home, routine slowly established itself. Max, more vigilant than ever, rarely left Noah alone. The dog seemed to have assumed the role of guardian, lying beside the crib during naps and alerting Martha or Jack at the slightest sign of discomfort from the baby. One afternoon, while Martha had gone out to shop, Jack found himself alone with Noah for the first time since his birth. The baby, now almost 3 months old, was awake in his crib, his curious little eyes exploring the world around him. Jack, hesitant, approached. "Hi, little one," he murmured, his voice trembling. Noah turned his head toward the sound, and for a moment, father and son looked at each other in silence. Then, to Jack's surprise, the baby smiled. It was a genuine smile, full of innocence and pure joy. Something inside Jack melted at that instant. Carefully, he picked Noah up. The weight of the baby in his arms, so light and yet so significant, brought tears to his eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "I'm sorry for not being here for you. But I promise from now on, I'll try to be the father you deserve." Max, who was watching the scene from the doorway, slowly approached, as if sensing the importance of the moment. The dog touched his nose to Jack's leg, offering his silent support. That night, when Martha returned, she found a scene that warmed her heart. Jack asleep in the armchair in the baby's room, with Noah nestled against his chest and Max lying at his feet. It was as if, finally, the pieces were beginning to fit together. The days that followed brought small but significant progress. Jack began to participate more actively in Noah's care, changing diapers, though still clumsily, preparing bottles and even singing lullabies that Sarah used to sing. At work, his colleagues noticed the change. Although still distant and often lost in thought, Jack began to get involved in projects again, his creativity slowly resurfacing. One day, upon finishing a sketch for a sustainable house, he realized that he had unconsciously incorporated elements that Sarah always admired in their joint designs. Instead of the paralyzing pain he expected to feel, Jack experienced a bittersweet sensation of connection with his lost wife. Therapy continued to be a challenge, but Jack was beginning to see its benefits. In a particularly intense session, he finally managed to verbalize the fear that consumed him. What if I'm not capable of loving Noah enough? What if I never manage to be the father he needs? His therapist, Dr. Rachel, listened attentively before responding. Jack, love isn't something that appears instantly. It's something that grows. That is cultivated day after day. The fact that you're here fighting to overcome your pain already shows how much you love your son. These words echoed within Jack for days, giving him strength in moments when guilt and fear threatened to dominate him again. One night, while putting Noah to sleep, Jack noticed a photo album on the shelf that he hadn't seen in months. With his heart racing, he picked it up and began to leaf through it. Each page brought memories of his life with Sarah, their wedding day, trips, everyday moments full of laughter and love. Reaching the last pages, he found photos of Sarah's pregnancy, her face radiant with happiness. Jack felt tears stream down his face, but this time they weren't only tears of sadness. There was a mixture of longing, gratitude, and surprisingly, hope. He looked at Noah, now peacefully asleep, and whispered, "Your mother loved you so much, son. And I promise I'll tell you all the stories about her, so you'll know how amazing she was." Max, always attentive, approached and rested his head on Jack's lap, offering silent comfort. Jack stroked the dog's ears, grateful for his constant and loyal presence. That night, lying in his bed, Jack reflected on the path ahead. He knew there would still be difficult days, moments when the pain of loss would hit him with full force. But for the first time since Sarah's death, he felt that perhaps, just perhaps, there was a future worth fighting for. With this resolution in mind, Jack fell asleep, not knowing that fate still held surprises and challenges that would test his newly discovered strength and determination. Fall arrived, painting the neighborhood trees with shades of red and gold. Jack watched the leaves falling through the window of his home office, a steaming cup of coffee in his hands. Noah, now 6 months old, played on the carpet nearby under Max's watchful eye. The last few months had brought significant changes. Jack had returned to work full-time, balancing his career with paternal responsibilities. Martha, although still a constant presence, had begun to give more space for Jack to assume his role as a father. "Ba-ba-ba," babbled Noah, shaking a colorful rattle. Jack smiled, bending down to play with his son. These moments, once so painful, were now sources of joy and connection. "You're becoming quite the chatterbox, huh?" Jack joked, tickling the baby's belly. Noah's contagious laughter filled the room, making even Max raise his ears with interest. That afternoon, while tidying up some papers, Jack found an envelope he hadn't seen in months. Inside, there was a card from Sarah, written shortly before, going into labor. With his heart racing, he began to read, "My love, as I write this, our baby is moving like never before. I can't wait to meet him and see him in your arms. I know we'll be the best parents in the world together. I love you more than anything. Forever yours, Sarah." The tears came, but this time accompanied by a nostalgic smile. Jack caressed the words on the paper, feeling a renewed connection with Sarah. "She was right about you being a great father," said Martha, who had silently entered the room. "Sarah would be proud to see how you've overcome all this." Jack nodded, grateful for his mother-in-law's constant support. "I couldn't have done it without you, Martha. Thank you for not giving up on me." The following days brought a comfortable routine. Jack took Noah for walks in the park, Max always beside the stroller, vigilant. The nights were filled with made-up stories, lullabies, and sometimes imagined conversations with Sarah about their son's progress. At work, Jack finally felt ready for new challenges. When the opportunity arose to lead a major urban revitalization project, he didn't hesitate to apply. "Are you sure about this?" asked his partner Tom, with a mixture of concern and hope. "It's a huge project. It will demand a lot of time and dedication." Jack looked at the photo of Noah on his desk and smiled. "I am. It's time to come back with everything. For me and for my son." The project was ambitious, transforming a degraded area of the city into a green and sustainable space, with accessible housing and recreational areas. While working on the initial plans, Jack found himself incorporating elements that he knew Sarah would love: vertical gardens, community spaces, playgrounds integrated with nature. The weeks passed in a whirlwind of meetings, sketches, and nights, awake refining ideas. Martha was fundamental, helping with Noah whenever Jack needed to work late. One night, exhausted but satisfied with the project's progress, Jack went to check on Noah before sleeping. The baby slept peacefully, Max as always lying near the crib. Observing his son, Jack felt a wave of love and gratitude so intense it almost knocked him down. "We're making it, Sarah," he whispered to the silent room. "It's not perfect, but we're moving forward." The day of the project presentation finally arrived. Jack, dressed in his best suit, felt a mixture of nervousness and excitement that he hadn't experienced in a long time. Before leaving, he knelt in front of Noah. "Daddy's going to do something important today, little man," he said, adjusting his tie. "Wish me luck." Noah, as if understanding, gave one of his toothless smiles and clapped his hands. Max barked, softly, as if also offering support. At City Hall, before a room full of authorities and investors, Jack presented his vision for the future of the city. As he talked about sustainable communities and spaces that united people, he felt Sarah's presence beside him as if she were there, proud and encouraging. At the end of the presentation, the room erupted in applause. The mayor, visibly impressed, approached Jack. "Extraordinary, Mr. Walker. This project can change the face of our city. We're eager to work with you." That night back home, Jack was greeted by Noah, Martha, and Max, while playing with his son on the living room rug, animatedly telling about his day. He realized something. He was truly happy for the first time in a long time. "I think we've found our way, little one," he said to Noah, who laughed while trying to grab his father's glasses. "Your mother always said we could change the world. Seems like we're going to try, right?" Max approached, lying down beside them as he always did. Jack stroked the dog's fur, grateful for his unwavering loyalty. As night fell outside, the house was filled with renewed energy. Jack knew that the road ahead would still have challenges, but for the first time in a long time, he felt prepared to face them. With Noah in his arms and the memories of Sarah in his heart, he was ready to write the next chapter of their lives. What Jack didn't know was that fate still held some surprises, both sweet and bitter, that would test his newly discovered strength and change the course of their lives once more. The urban revitalization project was advancing rapidly, consuming much of Jack's time and energy. However, he strived to maintain a balance between work and his life with Noah, who was now almost a year old. On a sunny Saturday morning, Jack decided to take Noah and Max for a walk in the park that was part of the revitalization project. As they walked along the newly paved paths, Jack excitedly explained to his son about the trees that would be planted and the playgrounds that would be built. "Look, Noah," Jack said, pointing to an open area. "We'll have a small pond with ducks. Here, you'll love feeding them." Noah clapped enthusiastically, even without fully understanding what his father was saying. Max trotted happily beside them, his tail wagging in the air. It was at this moment that Jack heard a familiar voice calling his name. Turning around, he saw Emily, an old college classmate he hadn't seen in years. "Jack!" What a surprise to find. "You here?" exclaimed Emily, approaching with a warm smile. "Emily, it's been so long," replied Jack, genuinely happy to see a friendly face. "This is my son, Noah." Emily bent down to greet little Noah, who observed her with curiosity. "He's beautiful, Jack, the spitting image of Sarah." She hesitated for a moment, realizing what she had said. "I'm sorry. I heard about... Well, I'm sorry for your loss." Jack felt a tightness in his chest but managed to smile. "Thank you, Emily. It's been difficult, but we're moving forward." The two began to chat, walking together through the park. Emily was a landscape architect and was fascinated to hear about the revitalization project. As they talked, Jack was surprised by how easily the words flowed between them, as if the years of distance had never existed. In the weeks that followed, Emily and Jack began to meet more frequently. She offered to help with the project, bringing innovative ideas for green spaces. Noah adored her presence, always laughing at the funny faces Emily made. One night, while working late at Jack's office, Emily took a break and looked at him seriously. "Jack, can I ask you a personal question?" Jack nodded, curious. "Have you ever thought about moving on, romantically?" The question caught Jack by surprise. He looked at the photo of Sarah on his desk, feeling a confused mixture of emotions. "I don't know, Emily. Sometimes it feels like it would be a betrayal to her memory." Emily gently placed her hand on his. "Sarah loved life, Jack. I'm sure she would want you to be happy." Emily's words echoed in Jack's mind for days. He found himself thinking about what it would be like to have someone by his side again, sharing the good and bad moments. But whenever these thoughts arose, guilt consumed him. One night, while putting Noah to sleep, Jack confided in Martha. "I don't know what to do, Martha. Part of me wants to move on, but—" Martha interrupted him with a tight hug. "Jack, my dear, Sarah always wanted the best for you and Noah. Don't feel guilty for wanting to be happy." Martha's words gave Jack the courage he needed. On a Sunday afternoon, he invited Emily for lunch at his house. As he watched Emily playing with Noah in the garden, Max lying lazily in the sun, Jack felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time: hope for the future. However, fate had other plans. The next morning, Jack received a call that would change everything. It was from the law office that handled Sarah's will. "Mr. Walker," said the grave voice on the other end of the line, "we discovered something in your wife's will that needs your immediate attention." Jack felt a chill down his spine. "What is it?" "Apparently, before passing away, your wife made a very specific request. The lawyer paused as if searching for the right words. "She left instructions that in case something happened to her, you should seek out a fertility clinic. Sarah, she froze some of her eggs." The world seemed to spin around Jack. He gripped the table to steady himself, his legs suddenly too weak to support him. "She left a letter for you," continued the lawyer. "I would like you to come to the office to pick it up as soon as possible." Jack hung up the phone, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. Sarah had left the possibility of having another child, even after her departure. It was a decision that could completely change the course of their lives. That night, sitting on the porch with Noah asleep in his arms and Max at his feet, Jack contemplated the starry sky. He thought about Sarah, about Emily, about Noah, about the baby that could come to exist. The future, which recently seemed so clear, was now shrouded in a fog of uncertainties. "What do I do now, Sarah?" he whispered to the stars, expecting an answer that he knew wouldn't come. The wind blew softly, rustling the leaves of the trees. Jack closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the decision he would have to make. A decision that would affect not only him, but everyone around him. Fate had placed Jack at a crossroads, and the path he chose would define not only his future, but that of his family. With a heavy heart and a mind full of doubts, he knew that the coming days would be crucial. What Jack didn't imagine was that this revelation would be just the beginning of a series of events that would test his strength, his love, and his ability to forgive and move forward. The days that followed the lawyer's revelation were a whirlwind for Jack. He felt torn between the emotion of having a part of Sarah still alive and the fear of what this decision could mean for his life and Noah's. With trembling hands, Jack opened the letter that Sarah had left. Her words, written in the delicate handwriting he knew so well, jumped from the page. "My darling Jack, if you're reading this, it means the worst has happened. I know you must be suffering, and my heart breaks just thinking about it. But I want you to know that my love for you and our son is eternal. I made the decision to freeze my eggs because I believe in the love we built and the family we dreamed of. I know it may seem crazy, but I wanted to give you the chance to have another little piece of me if you so desire. It's not an obligation, love. It's a choice, one that only you can make. Whatever your decision, know that I support you and love you unconditionally. Take care of our Noah. Tell him every day how much he is loved. And remember, life is meant to be lived. Be happy, Jack. It's all I ever wanted for you. With all my love, Sarah. Tears flowed freely down Jack's face as he read and reread the letter. It was as if Sarah were there, speaking directly to him, giving him permission to move forward, but also offering a connection to the past. In the days that followed, Jack found himself on an emotional roller coaster. He spent hours playing with Noah, observing every detail of his son, imagining what it would be like to have another baby. Other times, he sat in his office, looking at the plans for the revitalization project, thinking about how his professional life would be affected. Emily noticed the change in Jack. One afternoon, while they were reviewing some drawings of the park, she finally asked, "Jack, what's going on? You seem distant." Jack hesitated for a moment before sharing the news about Sarah's eggs. Emily listened attentively, her face a mixture of surprise and concern. "Wow, that's intense," she finally said. "What do you plan to do?" "I don't know, Emily," Jack replied, running his hands through his hair in a gesture of frustration. "Part of me desperately wants this, having another child with Sarah. It's like she's giving me one last gift. But another part is afraid," Emily completed softly. Jack nodded. Afraid of not being prepared, of not being fair to Noah, of not being able to move forward. Emily took his hand, squeezing it gently. "Jack, whatever your decision, know that you're not alone in this." Emily's words brought comfort, but they also added another layer of complexity to the situation. Jack wondered how a potential new baby would affect his developing relationship with Emily. One night, while putting Noah to bed, the little one pointed to a photo of Sarah on the dresser and said clearly, "Mommy." It was the first time Noah had recognized Sarah in a photo, and Jack's heart filled with a bittersweet mixture of joy and sadness. At that moment, sitting on the edge of Noah's bed, with Max lying at his feet, Jack had an epiphany. He realized that regardless of his decision about Sarah's eggs, the most important thing was to honor her memory by being the best father possible to Noah and living life fully as she always wanted. With this clarity, Jack scheduled a meeting with the doctor at the fertility clinic. He wanted to understand all the implications and possibilities before making a final decision. On the day of the consultation, Jack felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. While waiting in the antiseptic waiting room of the clinic, he looked at his phone, seeing messages of support from Martha and a photo of Noah that Emily had sent earlier. The doctor, Dr. Robert, was a middle-aged man with a gentle smile. He patiently explained the process, the risks, and the chances of success. "Mr. Walker," said Dr. Robert at the end of the consultation, "I understand this is an extremely personal and emotional decision. There's no rush. Take the time you need to think." Leaving the clinic, Jack walked aimlessly through the city streets. His steps led him to the park he was helping to revitalize. Sitting on a bench, he observed families passing by, children laughing and playing. It was then that his phone rang. It was Tom, his partner. "Jack, we have a problem with the project. The mayor wants to make some last-minute changes that could compromise all our work from the last few months." The news hit Jack like a bucket of cold water. Suddenly he found himself having to balance not only his personal life, but also his career, which seemed to be at a crucial moment. As the sun set on the horizon, painting the sky in orange tones, Jack found himself at a crossroads. The decision about Sarah's eggs, the future of his relationship with Emily, raising Noah, and now the professional challenges, everything seemed to converge at this moment. With a heavy heart, but determined, Jack got up from the bench. He knew that the choices he would make in the coming days would shape not only his future, but that of all those around him. With a deep sigh, he began to walk back home, ready to face whatever fate had in store for him. What Jack didn't know was that the universe still had some surprises in store, which would test his resilience, and change the course of his story in ways he could never have imagined. Fall gave way to winter, and with the change of seasons came a transformation in Jack's life. The months that followed the discovery of Sarah's eggs were intense, full of deep reflections and difficult decisions. After weeks of pondering, consultations with psychologists, and long conversations with Martha and Emily, Jack made his decision. He chose not to proceed with the fertilization process. It was a painful choice, but Jack felt it was the right thing to do. He wanted to honor Sarah's memory, but he also needed to look to the future. Sarah gave me the greatest gift of all, our Noah, Jack explained to Martha on a cold July night. I think the best way to honor her memory is by being the best father possible for him. Martha, with tears in her eyes, hugged her son-in-law. Sarah would be proud of you, Jack. You've grown so much. With this decision made, Jack felt as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He could now focus entirely on Noah, his work, and his developing relationship with Emily. The urban revitalization project faced its challenges. The changes demanded by the mayor almost compromised the original vision, but Jack and his team worked tirelessly to find a middle ground that preserved the essence of the project while meeting the demands of City Hall. On a sunny September morning, almost 2 years after Sarah's passing, Jack stood in the middle of the new park, watching children playing on the newly installed equipment. Noah, now almost 2 years old, ran happily after Max, who, though older, still maintained his energy and loyalty. Emily approached, intertwining her fingers with Jack's. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" she said, looking around. "You really transformed this place." Jack smiled, feeling a mixture of pride and gratitude. "We transformed it," he corrected, gently squeezing her hand. At that moment, observing the life pulsing around him, Jack had an epiphany. He realized that life, like the city, was in constant transformation. The important thing wasn't to desperately cling to the past, but to honor it while building a new future. With Noah in his arms and Emily by his side, Jack walked to a newly planted garden. There, a small bronze plaque shone in the sun, in memory of Sarah Walker, whose love and vision continue to inspire and transform lives. Jack felt tears in his eyes, but this time they were tears of gratitude and hope. He looked at Noah, who smiled innocently, and then at Emily, who watched him with affection. "You know," Jack said softly, "I think I finally understood what Sarah meant in her letter. Life is to be lived, and that's what I intend to do every day with you two by my side." Emily hugged him, and Noah, sensing the special moment, threw his little arms around his father's neck. Max, always attentive, approached, touching his nose to Jack's leg. In the months that followed, life continued its course. Jack and Emily decided to live together, bringing a new dynamic to the family. Noah, although sometimes confused with the changes, flourished with the love and attention he received. Martha, although initially apprehensive about the new family configuration, ended up becoming a great ally. She saw in Emily not a substitute for her daughter, but a new friend who brought joy to her son-in-law and grandson's lives. Jack's work continued to prosper. The success of the revitalization project opened doors for new challenges and opportunities. He found himself leading sustainable urbanization initiatives in other cities, always with Emily's unconditional support and Noah's love as his foundation. One spring afternoon, almost 3 years after Sarah's passing, Jack was sitting on the house porch, watching Noah play in the garden with Max. Emily joined him, a mysterious smile on her lips. "Jack," she said softly, "I have something to tell you." He turned to her, curious. Emily took his hand and placed it on her belly. "We're pregnant," she whispered, her eyes shining with emotion. Jack felt his heart race. A mixture of joy, surprise, and a touch of apprehension invaded him. For a moment he thought of Sarah, how she would react to this news, but then, looking into Emily's eyes and hearing Noah's laughter in the background, he knew he was exactly where he was supposed to be. "That's wonderful," he replied, pulling Emily into a tight hug. That night, after Noah went to sleep, Jack sat on the edge of his son's bed. Max, as always, was lying on the carpet beside it. Jack looked at the photo of Sarah on the bedside table and smiled. "Thank you," he whispered to the smiling image of his first wife. "Thank you for teaching me to love, for giving me Noah, and for showing me that life goes on. I promise our son will always know how much you loved him." As Jack gently closed the door to Noah's room, he felt a peace he hadn't experienced in years. The future, once so uncertain and frightening, now seemed full of possibilities and love. Outside, the city he had helped transform pulsed with life. And inside the house, his family, both the one he lost and the one he was building, enveloped him in a warm embrace of love and hope. Jack knew that the road ahead would still have its challenges. There would be difficult days, moments of doubt and longing, but he also knew that he was ready to face them. With Noah, Emily, the baby on the way, Martha and the faithful Max by his side, Jack was ready to write the next chapter of his life, honoring the past while embracing the future with courage and love. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope that the journey of Jack, Noah, and all the characters in this story has touched your hearts. To continue this emotional journey, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories. Find it here, clicking to the left. If you enjoyed this narrative, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. Every day we bring unique stories that explore life's complexity. Don't miss our upcoming content. We look forward to reading your impressions and emotions about this story of love, loss, and rebirth in the comments.